Hello, everybody. Just want to make sure you know I'm here.
Hi.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon from India. Actually, it is evening.
Good morning for me.
Yes, good morning to you.
Thank you.
Yes, our participants are joining, sir, and Dr. Banga will also be joining very shortly. So we will be good to go in a couple of minutes.
Great. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yes. So I hope others are able to hear Dr. Luke. Sunidhi, is he audible? If you can give me a feedback kindly.
Yes, ma'am. I'm able to hear both of you. It's great to be here.
All right. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Manu. We have a few external guests from Dayanand Sagar University, India, sir, who have joined the program because of your profile and the topic. So people got interested and have joined the session today. So we have guests from outside like Sushmita Datta. I can see here, and I think somebody has joined on a phone, but then I cannot make out. So there will be a couple of people who will be joining. Manu, can you hear us?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. A few ground rules so that we can proceed very seamlessly. In fact, I have joined with another connection because Wi-Fi and power connection is a bit unstable in certain parts. So I have connection so that the meeting can proceed as usual. I am thankful to Dr. Banga sir, our Dean Research, Dayanand Sagar University Research Cell, for giving us the permission and the opportunity to invite distinguished guests, and today we have our international speaker, Dr. Luke, Pittaway from Ohio University, US, who agreed to give a little bit of insight to our doctoral scholars about becoming educators. Thank you, sir, for joining. I also would like to thank our scholars and guests. Today, sir, is a festival. It's Bakri Eid. So they have also been able to take a few couple of minutes time from their festivals in order to join the session. Thanks for joining. Imtiaz, Mr. Imtiaz, who is my co-host and is the technical support team from our Department of Executive Education, Professor Nagaraj Rao's team, who has kindly supported us with this link. Mr. Imtiaz, Nasiruddin Sheikh, happy festival to you, sir. And thanks for being here. Of course, all our dear scholars who are today here for this session, thanks so much for joining. We would request that while we wait for Dr. Banga sir to join us, while the session is in progress, may we request all of you to kindly mute your audio and video in case you think that could enhance your bandwidth. We will have sufficient time after Dr. Luke's session in terms of his interaction. He would like a question and answer session. So at that time, we would give you the opportunity to unmute yourself, both audio and video, and you could ask your doubts and questions. However, for those who may not be able to do so, please feel free to put your doubts in the chat box so that I think sir can also see the chat box. Sir, are you able to see the chat box?
can, yes.
Otherwise, I will read it out to you. So, scholars and guests, everyone is free to put in their comments and your views and perspectives also on the in the chat box as well. Anything else, sir, I'm missing out?
No, it sounds correct.
Okay.
Looking forward to it.
Right. I'll just put it on mute for a couple of minutes time, I think a couple of seconds, and I'll just check on Dr. Banga, sir.
Okay, all right.
Okay, we are very happy to have Dr. Banga, sir, join us. Dr. M.K. Banga is the Dean of Research, the Research Cell, Dayananda Sagar University, Bengaluru, India. Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening.
Thanks to your inspiration, all this is possible, sir. I welcome you to kindly welcome the distinguished guest. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Yeah. Good morning, Professor Luke. And
Morning.
good evening to all others. Sir, it is a pleasure to welcome you to this, here, of course, evening session for our research scholars. We have, 65 people who have joined, for the research program this year. And they are coming from different, disciplines like, computer science and engineering, mechanical engineering, then electronics and communication engineering, maths, mathematics, chemistry, physics, biological sciences, pharmaceutical sciences, and these are the disciplines that we have for the research program. And we had some sessions now for these research scholars, and we thought we will give international flavor to the training program for these research scholars. That's how we invited you to this session. I'm really thankful to you for your participation in this session. In fact, I should thank you for taking your time off to address our research scholars. Thanks. Let me thank you first of all, and then I welcome you to this session, and I request you to give all necessary inputs which will help them in their research journey. With this, let me now request Dr. Anupama to give brief biosketch of yours, so that students, our research scholars, will know as to what type of study you have done, and how you rose in your how you could rise in your career. Those are the things now we thought will be very valuable to our research scholars. And now over to Dr. Anupama. Dr. Anupama, please introduce the guest.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So I will give a brief of our guest for today, Dr. Luke. So I'm sorry, there's a call. So Dr. Luke Pittaway is the Associate Dean for Graduate Programs from Ohio University, USA, and we warmly welcome you, sir, for today's talk to all the research scholars and guests of our university. And we are hosting this webinar from the research cell of Dayananda Sagar University, Bengaluru, India. To give a brief about our guest today, Dr. Luke Pittaway is an established academic in the field of entrepreneurship, having been awarded USASBE's 2018 Entrepreneurship Educator of the Year. He is currently the Obelness Professor of Entrepreneurship and Associate Dean for the undergraduate programs at Ohio University, USA. At OU, he also served as the chair of the Department of Management and director of the Center for Entrepreneurship. He has proved his ability as an academic leader, having led a large department, and has previously started and led a number of centers for entrepreneurship at multiple higher education institutions in the United States and the United Kingdom. Some of his accomplishments: his research experience, prior research grant successes, a proven track record of publication, and completion of an AACSB accredited PhD illustrates research credibility. Expertise in entrepreneurial learning and education, innovation, creativity, and corporate venturing demonstrates knowledge and experience of innovation in organizations facing change. Experience in teaching, evidence of innovative teaching, and national teaching awards highlights the value placed on quality teaching, learning environments, and student success. Prior leadership roles show an ability to develop a strategic perspective, to motivate and lead others collaboratively, to implement improvements, and to successfully manage large administrative units. Success with large infrastructure projects proves an ability to work externally and secure funds through strategic partnerships, alumni relations, and development fund raising. Some of the other highlights in Dr. Luke's career is he has assisted Swansea University with the founding of an Institute for Entrepreneurship and Leadership while a visiting professor for 2 years, helped to recruit key leaders, launch new classes, and supervised PhD students. Co-founded the Enterprise and Regional Development Unit and the Center for Regional Economic and Enterprise Development at the University of Sheffield that led to significant grant funding outcomes for the university in entrepreneurship and regional development, including ESRC, ERDF, and European Sixth Framework Program. He has run multiple executive programs for entrepreneurs, including 6 Squared Lead and the International Entrepreneurship Educators Program, while in the United Kingdom, and secured grant funds to support the programs as well as generating new revenue. He has secured significant European regional development funding while at Lancaster University to assist the launch of the Institute for Entrepreneurship and Enterprise Development and played an important role in its launch. Some of his other accomplishments: he has been on the editorial board and US regional editor, International Journal of Entrepreneurial Behavior and Research from 2007 to 2016. He has been an external examiner, the Hunter Center for Entrepreneurship, University of Strathclyde, 2007 to 2010. He is a fellow Royal Society of the Arts from the year 2007 till the present moment. National Council for Graduate Entrepreneurship, NCGE, International Entrepreneurship Educators Program, Program Manager from March 2007 to December 2007. National Council for Graduate Entrepreneurship, Research and Education Fellow, Jan 2006 to March 2007. ISBE Conference, International Small Business Journal, Best Paper Prize for Academic Rigor, 2005, and Best Overall Paper, 2005. International Small Business Journal, Consulting Editor from the year November 2005 to November 2007. LTSN Award for Teaching Excellence in Entrepreneurship, May 2004. We welcome you, Dr. Luke. Welcome to Research Cell, Dayanand Sagar University, Bengaluru, India. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. That's a very warm welcome. I'm just going to go ahead and share my slides here and make sure that we can do that. Let's see how we're doing. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my slides.
Yes, I can see that. And
okay, great.
So Nidhi, are you able to see that? Kind feedback, please.
Yes, ma'am. I'm able to see his slides.
All right. Thank you so much.
And as always happens with slides, there seems to be an error in the design. I'm just having a quick look. Okay, so something's happened. So, okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me today. It is really an honor to come and talk to you about doctoral training, and particularly about how students individually can maximize their opportunities while doctoral students to effectively become more effective educators. So I think you had a wonderful kind of overview of my bio, so I won't need to do this slide anyway since it's messed up. But the thing I wanted to highlight here is that you know, I've been a passionate entrepreneurship educator pretty much my entire career. I'm very, very interested in how we enhance career development for educators. As you heard, I led an international educators program in the UK. Designed to really enhance how educators teach entrepreneurship. Now, entrepreneurship is an interesting subject. It's not just about venture creation and startups. It's about entrepreneurial mindsets, competencies, and approaches. And you know, what becomes evident when you think about entrepreneurship, it is also about innovative teaching and learning, and how educators in general can introduce more innovative and entrepreneurial approaches to educational practices in order to enhance how students develop their own mindsets in enterprise and entrepreneurship and their competences. And these days, when we talk about entrepreneurship education, we also talk about it being spread across the entire campus and embedded in disciplines across the entire subjects that you expect to find in a university. So this is not just about educating people to become entrepreneurs. It's about educating people to develop enterprising and entrepreneurial mindsets, and to have those mindsets embedded in disciplines across a campus. So for the talk, I think I've got about 30 minutes, and I hope to have lots of Q&A opportunities, and I look forward to answering your questions. So I thought it was always good to give a little bit of context. So I'm going to start off by just introducing Ohio University, explaining where I am physically. It's 7:30 a.m. Well, at least it was 7:30 a.m. when we started in the US here. So we're nine and a half hours time zone difference. And so I'll introduce Ohio University, give you a little bit of context of where I'm talking from today. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the research context. You know, why did we start doing this research? Why is it important? Why did we feel that we needed to conduct the work that we're undertaking? And then I'm going to talk about the research methodology. Obviously, many of you are PhD students or in the process of PhD. This is research that we're conducting. We're right in the middle of the research at this present time. And so I'm just going to talk through the methodology that we're using, just to give some insights into that. I mean, many of you are coming from, it sounded like science and engineering and other disciplines. So this methodology is very much a social science methodology. It's a qualitative research, so it'll be a bit different for many of you, and I hope that is insightful. And then finally, we're just going to put forward some, I wouldn't even call them preliminary findings. I think that's probably a bit too early to call them findings. We are in the middle of the research right now. We have conducted a whole series of interviews with PhD students. And so they're really sort of some observations really from the initial set of interviews that we've conducted. And I think these observations are really quite insightful in terms of, you know, how can a student maximize their opportunities to become a better educator while they're obviously focused on developing their research skills during a PhD and conducting research and completing their thesis. So I just really want to focus on that aspect of PhD training, is how do programs help PhD students and professors become better educators, and what can students do themselves outside of their programs to enhance their opportunities to really improve their ability to be effective, and in our case, when we talk about entrepreneurship, really innovative educators. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop innovative educators. So Ohio University, I just want to give you a couple of pictures. You can see it's an old university, 1804. It was founded. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it in a moment. We're in a rural area. It's Appalachia, Ohio. So it's just next to West Virginia in the southeast of Ohio. And we're in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. It's 20-odd thousand students and you know, a little town, a little rural town. And we're in Columbus, Ohio. So can everybody hear me okay? I'm getting a bit of feedback. How's everybody? Yeah, I think maybe somebody needs to mute their mic. Okay, so we're in Columbus, Ohio, which is, and if you can see, Ohio is sort of the first set of states once you get past the East Coast, the main East Coast area. So, as I mentioned, established in 1804. Yeah, I'm still getting a little bit of feedback. Could we just check that everybody's got their mic muted?
I'll just check.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just carry on. Hopefully we can figure out what's going on there. The university was established in 1804, as I mentioned. It's quite an interesting story. Right around the War of Independence, as the Americans call it, the Revolutionary War, as the British call it. We had a group of people sitting in a bar in Philadelphia and decided to establish the Ohio Territory. And during that kind of period, which is really the first set of states after the first 13 colonies, they decided that, you know, if they were going to have these new states or this new area that they were going to develop, they really ought to have a couple of universities. So they literally took a pin, 2 pins, and put them in a map in what was effectively Indian territory at that point in time, Native American Indian territory at that point in time. And they said, okay, well, just have 2 universities, one there, and put these 2 pins in a map. And that's how Ohio University and Miami University in Ohio were established. And they didn't really get started until, certainly for Ohio, it was closer to the areas that were already developed. And so around about 1830, 1824, the first set of buildings were built on campus. It's an old campus. It's called Harvard on the Hockin. The first professors that came here were from Harvard, and so much of the campus is very Harvard-like. It's built around different greens. You can see sort of the old colonial feel to it by this kind of approach to having greens and building all the buildings around the greens. We're actually, you know, it's a small town. It's rural. It's considered one of the top small college towns in the US in terms of attractiveness of the campus, attractiveness of the location. We have about 20,000 students on the Athens campus. We do actually have some residential campuses and some campuses in Columbus and Cleveland, and so we actually have about 30,000 students in total. It is, given that we're in a very rural area in the US that's not exactly diverse, we actually do have a very international kind of approach to everything we do. We have a lot of international students. We have a lot of international relationships. Just the College of Business, we send students to 20, 30 different locations every year. Well, not at the moment, but generally speaking, that's what we're doing. The business school that I'm actually in, the business school here, is one of the top public business schools in the United States. It's ranked as the 15th top best business school, and we're very proud of our educational practices. And yeah, it's got a pretty good student to faculty ratio, given that we are a public institution. So here's just a few pictures, just to give you a bit of flavor of the campus. You've got obviously a picture of just looking over the campus itself. The building is actually the College of Business building that I'm actually stood in right now and talking to you from. Obviously it's America, so we have a football ground and a basketball stadium. Not an awful lot going on right now in terms of sports. In fact, there's nothing going on campus because we are still in lockdown here. And then we have this very historic piece of the campus. This is the first college green. We have a number of greens on campus, as I mentioned, and the first one is where the oldest buildings are, and there's this college gateway to to welcome the students to the campus and to also celebrate when they exit. So I'm just going to take a quick drink. I'm just going to move on next to the context for the research. So really the research was focused on, started from United States Association of Small Business and Entrepreneurship. So this is the big association in entrepreneurship and small business in the US. It's where all the educators and the researchers gather for entrepreneurship research. Basically there are 3 conferences in the US. We have the Academy of Management, and it has a special interest group in entrepreneurship, and it's a really big interest group, very research focused. We actually have a conference called the Babson Conference, which is a really big entrepreneurship research conference. And then we have USASB. And so, we're getting to the point with USASB where we were really the 3rd research conference in the country. It wasn't where the researchers were gathering, it was where the educators were gathering. So, research was important and is still important, but it was evident that we weren't ranked as the top research conference in the country for entrepreneurship. So USASB did a strategic pivot in around about 2015 to become much more focused on the teaching and learning and education side of people's work. So people could still come and do research papers, there was still research symposium, but the research tended to be focused a little bit more on entrepreneurship education, and a lot of the panel sessions and activities at the conference got focused much more on educator development and less focused on research. So I took on the leadership of the doctoral consortium for 3 years during this change of strategic focus. And so we had a doctoral consortium that was much more focused on inviting students from across the country to come to the conference, 20 to 30 students every year, but was focused on educator development. So we had all the top educators in the country doing various different sessions, a range of different things. Sometimes it was pedagogical, sometimes it was research focused, sometimes it was a practical session where they were learning certain skills. And not unlike the International Entrepreneurship Educators Program that I mentioned, or was mentioned earlier, that was to do with developing educators in the UK, that I was involved with in much earlier, 2008-9. So what became evidence in my leadership of that program, I probably had nearly 100 students go through that program while I was leading it for those 3 years, was that, first of all, there was clearly demand in the US for US doctoral students to come to a program that was focused on educator development. It was also evident that we were the only program that was focused on that. If a doctoral student went anywhere else, they were focused, it was, it was research methods, it was all focused on research. And as we got talking to the students, it became fairly clear to us that in the US situation right now, within business school education, there is almost little to no training for educators or teachers in their programs in terms of actually helping students become better educators. Obviously, there's a lot of training for research, but it was becoming evident from conversations with students that, there really wasn't any or very little development focused on helping them become better educators. And students, frankly, were frustrated by that. And that's one of the reasons they were at the USASB Doctoral Consortium. They were finding that extremely difficult, frustrating, challenging, that they, many of them were choosing to do PhD so that they could become professors and teachers, and were actually interested in the educational development side of their work and less in research, and yet there was no real training. So this led to our research questions, and our research questions are really quite simple, and they're quite practical. It's not, many of you will be, I'm sure, doing courses in philosophy and methodology, and I know many of you are from engineering and science backgrounds. So, research questions can sometimes be very complicated, but ours were very simple. We were interested in doctoral programs, and we were interested in how doctoral programs are helping students to become better educators. And we were then interested also to think about how students were developing their own educational competencies and experiences. And then finally, we have a sort of policy or a practical angle to our research, which is really to find ways to persuade programs to really enhance their training as it relates to educator development. I just wanted to also put forward the context for doctoral programs. So, I think everybody's aware that doctoral programs in different countries are very, very different. So I know, for example, in India, many PhD students are studying PhDs part-time while, for example, already teaching in programs. And certainly in the UK, that's not an uncommon situation. You get a master's, you get a job in a university, and then you do a PhD at a later point. Certainly, in some of our Central European partners in Hungary, we know that the PhD is really something that happens quite a bit later in the career. Whereas in the US, it really is training to become a professor. You really have to do a PhD before you can get that first job. And so, typically the PhD programs are full-time. They may have younger students that have finished master's degrees that really want to become professors. In some cases, they will have people that are returning, say from industry or from other walks of life, and have decided to have a career change. But in many cases, there are many students, also international students, that don't have any teaching experience. We do, when we look at the research, we do find certainly plenty of people that have got some adjunct teaching experience or have done things in their educational practice, that maybe they've been a professor, but it's fairly rare, probably rarer than it would be in the UK or India. So this research is just focused on US doctoral programs because of the differences in doctoral programs and how they are managed. So I just want to kind of give you a quick overview of the US doctoral approach. So the first big difference, and I'm aware of this because I did my PhD in the UK, is that you actually do classes. So you obviously get admitted, and there's a process for that, the field admission process. But in the US doctoral system, you do actually have a series of talk classes that are content-based. Sometimes they're methodology, sometimes they're about particular research questions. But in general, they might be, making sure that you have the basic knowledge in your subject. So if you take entrepreneurship, for example, a typical research seminar would involve, 6 to 10 students with a professor reading lots of research papers and having conversations and discussions, and possibly, some lectures on those particular areas that are relevant to that particular subject. So it's very subject-based. It's quite similar to what you would expect in a master's program. For certain, in the United Kingdom, we don't have that component within the PhD program. They then have to do comprehensive examinations. So there's this kind of point where you stop having the subjects and the talk classes, and you have to do this big, very stressful, from what I understand from the students, comprehensive examination that basically qualifies you to go into your candidacy period for your thesis, for the research part. So before you can even start on the dissertation or thesis research, you have to do a lot of courses and a comprehensive examination, which is definitely different from the UK system. Then you get into the dissertation. In most cases in the US, the dissertation is no longer, you still write a dissertation and you submit a dissertation, but in most cases, students are writing 3 research papers and submitting research papers. So the idea being that you graduate out of your PhD with actual publications, and the publications are designed to fit into different parts of your typical thesis and then become the thesis. So it's a little different again from the UK system, which is, I would describe it more like doing a book. You're doing this big thesis that you do spend 3 years on, and you pretty much write extensive amount of work on it as you do it, as opposed to trying to break down the thesis into publishable research papers. I would say though that the UK is sort of moving in that direction a little bit too. Then you have a formal defense. The defense is actually a little bit different typically, so in the UK, and I think the Indian system probably is similar. You tend to have external examiners. So this is really important because this is the viva. The thesis goes to the PhD external examiners. They read it. They have plenty of time to read it, and then they come in. They do a viva and do an examination. That's the typical British system. Well, in the American system, it's pretty much internal at this point. It's almost like a sign-off. I mean, you know, your real kind of the real kind of stepping point from really being into a PhD student is that comprehensive examination. You know, you have to do your thesis, you have to do it well. Your committee has to be, actually, be in alignment with the fact that you have done the work correctly. But I think it's a little less onerous than the British system, where you actually do have external examiners that are reading it for the very first time, and are having a pretty serious oral examination. So I think that's a little bit different. And then typically students are then submitting their dissertation and obviously graduating. So I'm going to move on to the research now. So this is the research methodology that we are conducting. So yeah, it is very much qualitative research. We're really interested in just trying to understand how programs are currently working and what they're currently doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it in the ways that they're doing it, and how students are experiencing that, and how they're, what their actual opinions are, what their perceptions of that. So we're qualitative research with a grounded theory approach works really well. So grounded theory, for those of you who don't know, is you don't really, come up with hypotheses or theories or conceptual frameworks prior to going into the field. The idea is that you go into the field and collect the data and allow your data analysis to really allow you to build theory. So it's really kind of, the whole purpose of grounded theory is try not to apply too much theory and concept prior to actually conducting research. You obviously have to have a research question. You have to know what you're looking for in terms of collecting data, but the data itself is really supposed to drive the research. And so in many ways, it's really designed to be a form of emergent research where, you have a question, you don't really have any good theory, and so you're going into the field to collect data to make to hopefully build some theories and some ideas. So just to make sure that you're aware of where we're coming from in terms of the type of research that we conduct. Qualitative, obviously, we're doing all sorts of things like interviews and secondary data. So we have triangulation of data sources, which is quite common these days in qualitative research, where you're really trying to cross-reference your research with different data sources. So in this case, we are interviewing PhD students. We are actually selecting those PhD students. I'll come back to the sampling in a minute, but we're selecting them from the doctoral consortium and then asking them to refer us to other students so we can diversify the sample. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Typically we're talking to students that are currently in their programs or who have recently graduated. We're then also accessing public information from the universities that are relevant. So in this situation, we're really looking to see how they're sort of talking about and selling their programs. So we're looking at websites and brochures and really trying to understand how they recruit students to their programs in order to attract them. And so what they're saying about the program, are they saying that, we're going to help you learn to be an educator, or are they saying, we're going to teach you how to be good researchers, and here's the methodological training that you're going to get, and things like that. So we're really interested in that component. And then finally, we're also talking to doctoral program directors. So these are the people managing programs. So there are, most cases the program is a formal program and there's a director of that program. And so we want to, in some ways, we're really sort of doing a little bit of covert research there. We're really talking to the program directors about the programs as a whole, and then delving a little bit deeper into how the programs are helping develop students as educators a little bit later in the interview process, because we recognize this is a sensitive topic, and also it's quite evident from our prior experiences that, in many cases, the US programs, certainly in business schools, are not really doing much. And so we don't want to come across as being negative about the programs at this point. We want to really understand their philosophy of why they're doing the program designs the way they are, and what's driving their approach, and then maybe looking a little bit more specifically at educator development later on in our research process. So from a sampling point of view, you have to consider this purposeful sampling. We are obviously recruiting students that have come to the doctoral consortium. that doctoral consortium was focused on educated development. So there's a potential bias in our sample in there that we have attracted, the students that are actually interested in becoming effective educators because they came to the consortium, and the consortium was focused on educated development. So we've introduced a second sampling approach, which I'm calling snowball sampling. It probably has a more formal term somewhere. And so basically what we do is every time we interview a student, we ask them to recommend 2 to 3 other students that we can interview. That way, we hope to use that as a way of diversifying our sampling away from maybe too much bias towards students that might have been specifically focused on educated development because they attended that USASB doctoral consortium. We're aiming for about, I think it's probably on the next slide. Yeah, okay, so data collection. So we have interviews with doctoral students. We're aiming for about 40. So the things I'm going to talk about in a little while are really, about 17 interviews at this point. Again, we haven't done any data analysis, so this is just observations that we've got from having conducted interviews, not actually analysing the data at this point. We're using Microsoft Teams, recording those interviews. And there's really 2 components to the student interviews. There's what's called a behavioural event interview. So a behavioural event interview, or you could call it the critical incidence technique, is where it's an unstructured interview technique where you ask the person that you're talking to identify 3 things, or it could be 5 or 6, whatever it is that you choose to do. And then you have a conversation around those three things. So in our case, we're asking students to identify 3 things that they consider has helped their ability to develop as an educator and during the period of their PhD. It doesn't have to be in the program itself. It can be anything that they've been involved in during the PhD training that they feel, from their perspective, has helped them develop as an educator. And that can be anything. It can be a relationship with a person. It can be an event. It can be a formal training course. It could be teaching. It could be pretty much anything. And then we follow that up with a slightly more structured set of questions, which are really asking, quite blunt perception questions. So, how do you feel about, how well you're getting developed as an educator? Do you think your program is doing a good job? Things like that. So, really quite open, straightforward, blunt questions designed to get the students to really give us their views on the particular issue that we're interested in. With the website brochure data, we're in experimental collection mode at the moment, so we just collected 5. And it's pretty simple. We're interested in any narrative that the programs have on the websites or in the brochures about the professional development part of their programs, how they intend to develop the students, and how they're selling the programs. So, as I mentioned earlier. And then finally, we're doing interviews with doctoral program directors. Again, not a large number, maybe about 10 doctoral directors. We haven't started that yet. As we're going through the interviews with students, we're getting referrals to those doctoral directors. So we have those contacts, and we'll be doing structured interviews with those doctoral directors. So in terms of data analysis, I don't know how many of you have got experience with qualitative research, but there is a very long-standing data analysis system called NVivo, which has been around for a long time. Allows you to code data. In the old days, when I was doing my PhD, you'd have to transcribe all the interviews, and then you code the data with this system with a transcribed interview. These days, it's getting really sophisticated. I haven't done this yet. I'm looking forward to it, but you can actually record. You can actually code and analyze recorded interviews using NVivo 12. You don't have to get transcripts anymore, which is definitely means you can do, a larger, if I was doing 40 interviews, that would be an awful lot of data to analyze when you transcribe. So an interview transcribed can be 50, 60, 70 pages. You've got 40 of those. It's going to take you months to code that data. So this has speeded up the ability to code data. So if anybody's doing qualitative research, it's useful to know that you can these days code data that is recorded or audio recorded or video recorded and not have to do transcripts. So I'm just going to talk through some of our preliminary sort of observations. I think it's better to call them observations. And at this point, it's really I'm really just trying to get over some practical tips. we obviously haven't finished this work yet, and so we have to, obviously actually finish collecting the data and analyze it properly. But there are definitely some observations and some tips we can give based on the interviews that we have conducted. So the first observation, and I think this is probably true of doctoral training across the board in the US, if I'm honest, but it's certainly true in business and entrepreneurship, that the PhD programs are really focused on producing excellent researchers who can actually be placed in the top tier research institutions in the US. So there's this kind of game going on. If you are a PhD program, you want to, how you get rated as a PhD program is how well you place your students. And so how well you place your students means you get them into the top research institutions in the United States. Now, there may be, I think there's thousands of universities in the United States. There's probably only 50 universities that would be considered the top research institutions. So many of the PhD students that are going to come through these PhD programs are not going to get placed in those research tier 1 institutions, but all of the programs are designed and all of the programs are trying to place students into those programs because that's what gives them prestige, that's what gets them ranked, that's what gets them better students. And so there's this kind of built up system whereby there really isn't any focus on the other types of universities that students might get placed in. Now, if they get placed in another type of university, so for example ours, we're what's called a balanced school, where teaching is extremely important as well as research, then they may not have the training that they need to be good in that kind of environment. And then there are many universities across the US that are purely teaching focused, that yes, a PhD is going to be important to get the job, but when you get there, really you're going to be focused on good quality teaching. You may have a higher teaching load than at a research institution. And yes, you're going to stay research active, but your teaching and your quality of your teaching is going to be fundamentally important for your professional development. And yet the programs clearly aren't in any way focused on helping the students become good educators. And so what we're finding is that there are a few things going on. So for example, if they're doing 60 credit hours of formal classes before they do their comprehensive examinations, which is all subject focused on a particular subject, they might get a 1 credit hour class that they have to take before they're allowed to teach anything. So in some cases it's a 1 credit hour class. It's how to handle problems in the classroom, or how to write a syllabus. It's real basic stuff. There's no training in advanced pedagogical methods such as problem-based learning, or how to do experiential learning, how to build more innovative things, how even to develop learning outcomes. So it's pretty basic stuff. And then typically students will get TA or teaching assistant opportunities. In some cases, these can be extremely valuable, but in general, so far, we're finding that these tend to be quite menial, in the sense that you're just running around trying to help a professor. You don't get any meaningful opportunity to observe that professor in the classroom or to help the teaching process in the classroom. So while you're a teaching assistant, you're not really getting much development as an educator. You're just running around, as a unpaid, fairly kind of secretarial type work in some ways. And then finally, students do have opportunities to teach. I mean, in many programs, you may be required to teach. In some programs, it's an option, but most programs allow some level of teaching for the students. But what's really interesting here is there is no preparation for teaching. So in many cases, we're in the old school where we just throw people into the deep end. And, that's evidently the case today in the US doctoral programs. It's like, okay, go ahead, just go and teach. I think the problem often for the US is also that many of the students are international students, and so they're teaching for the first time in a second language. And it's very, teaching for the first time is an intimidating thing, and teaching for the first time in a second language is particularly intimidating. And so, it's really, I think, inappropriate that programs just put people into teaching without any preparation at all. But we can debate that. I'm sure some of you will have different views. And then finally, they do encourage attendance at conferences and pay and provide funds for people to provide conferences. And obviously, many doctoral students came to USASB, which is focused on educator development, and so that is another way that students get that training. Although I will say in the interviews, it was evident that many professors, many programs actively discourage the attendance at an educator development conference. They want their students to really attend the research conferences. So while the funding and the support is certainly available, in general, from a engagement point of view, they're typically asking them to actually attend the research conferences and not go to the educator conferences. And then, so what basically our main observation at this point, and this is where I'm going to go into sort of the tips and ideas for you, is that students are largely left on their own. It's like, if you want to become a better educator, it's up to you. Don't rely on your program to give you that support to develop those skills. And so in most cases, the students that are really interested in becoming a better educator have to take initiative by themselves, and often do take initiative by themselves to find ways in which they can become a better educator. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move on to sort of some quick observations, which is really this is the tips. This is the things that students that are taking their own initiative are doing to help themselves become better educators, given that their programs are somewhat lacking in terms of supporting them to do that. And so the first one is observational methods. So it's pretty clear that some of the students that we're talking to, decide, I'm not getting any support. I'm just going to go and find the best person on campus, the best teacher on campus, and I'm going to ask if I can observe them, and I'm going to sit in their class. But also, they don't just sit in one class. They sit in an entire semester of classes. Sit there for the whole course. They don't just sit and observe. They actually take deliberate observational methodology techniques, and they write notes, and they observe the delivery methods, and they keep a diary, and they maybe sit down with the interview and with the professor and interview them, or they have deliberate efforts to engage in reflective practices with that professor. So one method for certain is this observational method. It's like, go find somebody that's really good at teaching and take a sophisticated approach to observing how they teach and talk to them. So certainly that was one of the methods that the students that we're talking to have used effectively to address the gap. Another method that seems evident is that many of the programs, the doctoral programs, lack a class in how to be an educator. And in some cases, if they do have a class, it's a very short 1 credit hour class that doesn't really give you very much depth, just the basics. And so the students that have been taking initiative and have been successful at kind of developing their education skills have actually sought out workshops and seminars designed to help them be a better educator. So in actual fact, one of the problems here is that the research programs themselves, the PhD programs themselves, have not actually, these things exist on campus in many cases, but they're not actually promoting them to the students. They're not telling the students that they exist. So one thing you can do as a student is go look, go see what exists on campus. I mean, most universities have colleges of education or departments of education. Many universities will have centers for teaching excellence, and they'll be offering seminars and workshops. And so usually, a university usually has workshops and seminars that are designed to help professors improve their teaching and learning. And so a PhD student can go seek those workshops and seminars and can sign up to them, and that can be another way that you can enhance your capability as an educator if those programs exist. And obviously that depends on the university, but certainly in the US, most universities have a department or college of education. They're already educating teachers, and so they're having to develop these opportunities, and indeed even undergraduate and master's classes that students sign up to and join so that they can learn the teaching practices part is also a possibility. And then, of course, as I mentioned, many universities have these teaching centres of excellence that will offer seminars, so you can join those. So the next kind of thing that you obviously want to do, and again, I think this is different in India because many of you probably are already teaching, but if you're a PhD student, you certainly need to get as much practice as possible, get as much experience as possible. So if you don't have a teaching assistance opportunity, volunteer to help professors. Take on as many opportunities as you can to teach. So if you do have an opportunity to teach, then volunteer for that. So in some instances, we were finding PhD programs where the students had opportunities to teach, but they weren't taking those opportunities up because the culture of the program really had them focused on the research side of their job. So it's like, you really need to get your research done. You really need to get some research papers done. That just ignore your teaching. Don't do any teaching. We don't need you to teach. We need you to get the research done. The problem with that is, of course, you've got PhD students that then go all the way through their program without any experience in teaching. And so it is a good idea to take up those opportunities if you get them, certainly within the US context. And then, in some instances, there were at least one program the university doesn't allow the graduate PhD students to actually teach. In those cases, the students there were recommending that the students in the programs there take up adjunct opportunities at other universities. It's like, well, your university that's doing your program won't allow you to teach at this university. You need to get some teaching experience. Go elsewhere and get that teaching experience. So certainly, again, as obviously, like a lot of things, as you do more, you improve, and so getting as much experience as possible is obviously a good thing. And then the next one, which I think is important, is in entrepreneurship we do a lot of research on learning by doing. So entrepreneurs do all sorts of wonderful things, and they're always trying to start stuff and do things. But sometimes you don't really learn unless you are actually reflecting on what you're doing. And so, while getting experience is important, and it is critical in many ways to get that experience, you don't necessarily become a better educator if you have experience. So you have to think about your experience as a form of learning, and therefore, you really need to, spend some time to reflect on the experiences you've gained so that you can consolidate your learning. So effective learning, in our view, really requires reflection. So you should make, if you are getting that experience, you should make deliberate efforts to reflect on the experiences that you're gaining, so that you can really consolidate the learning from those experiences. And so here, asking for feedback from students in classes, we all have teaching evaluations, but they're not always that great in terms of allowing us to improve our teaching practices. But asking a group of students, in a session, what was good about this session, what was bad about this session, and getting anonymous feedback on a more regular basis can be quite valuable. Having some of the students actually did have their teaching recorded and reviewed in a class, and so perhaps finding a way to have yourself recorded and spend some time assessing your performance from a recording is not a bad way. None of us like to watch recordings of ourselves, though, so personally don't like that one, but that is definitely a practice that we've seen in the research that some students have been doing, and some classes have actually been encouraging the students to do that, which is a good thing. And then you can ask for your other students that you work with to come and observe you in a class, and that's good for them, it's good for you, and sit down afterwards and talk about how you performed, depending on how comfortable you feel with your professors or your advisors. You can ask them to come and observe classes and give you feedback. So again, there's all sorts of different methods that can provide you feedback and reflection, so that the experience that you're getting actually is valuable, not just experience. It is actually learning. So another kind of set of tactics that seem to be evident is the students that are really kind of focused on this and wanting to develop their educational skills are really seeking out mentors while they're doing their PhDs. So obviously you have an advisor. Sometimes the advisor is the mentor, but the advisor may not necessarily be a good teacher, or the advisor may be very focused on trying to make sure that you're doing good research and not too focused on your development as an educator. And so, what the students are doing here are typically finding good teachers, the people on campus that are successful and excellent at teaching, and going and having conversations with them, and actually formally asking them to be mentors, and taking some time to actually engage in a proper mentoring process that is effective. It's not just a one-off conversation, but multiple conversations over many years, and designed to develop really strong relationships that help you advance your career progression and your skills as educators. Another observation I thought was quite interesting is some of the programs the students create their own groups, and actually develop their own seminars. They have offer pull in teachers and professors to come and actually give them seminars. So the program's not doing it, but the student group has offset the gap in the program by doing it themselves. And then obviously there's peer-to-peer learning going on. There's peer observation. There's actual opportunities to have some sort of class-like experiences that are engaged there. So it kind of a really interesting approach. Take initiative as a group rather than as an individual is kind of the message of that one. Oh, okay, we're having changes to the slides again. I'm sorry about that. So the most PhD programs do allow attendance at conferences, and so rather than just always going to that research conference and presenting your research paper, try to use the opportunity of money and funds for conference attendance to attend a conference that is focused on educator development, or a doctoral consortium that is designed to help you become a better educator. So it is evident that that is an opportunity, providing that your program and the people who are funding those support systems are willing to allow you to do that. And then the final one I would say is, certainly, again, I don't know if this is relevant for the Indian context, but for the American context, this is certainly the case, that the students themselves need to really lobby their programs, because it's clear that they are failing in terms of their approach to doctoral education as it relates to expanding and improving teaching skills and educator development alongside the research skills that the students need. Clearly, most programs are focused on research, and that's fine. We all need to be good researchers too, but we are ultimately all going to teach, and so not training people to be educators seems a pretty significant problem. And I would say that this is a trend that's occurring, so everybody is kind of aware of this in the US. It's not just business schools. There is a big debate in the business school literature about this issue, but it's also relevant in other disciplines, and other disciplines are having similar conversations like, are we really doing our PhD training appropriately? Are we really focused enough on how we develop educators? And for me, in entrepreneurship education, we're trying to have innovative educators. So if our PhD programs are not training to be even a basic educator, how can we hope that they can be an innovative educator? So there's a real gap in that. And then also, I think, just to be aware, in the US system, there really isn't, in other countries, you will get training in your first job as a teacher. So you'll go in, you have your first year of probation, and there might be several courses on education and teaching in that first year. So yeah, the PhD program might not do it, but you're going to do it in your first year on the job. That's not the case in the US. That the universities do not provide formal training in their first year or two when they recruit somebody. The first year is a tenure track process, and in that first year, you really need, not first year, the first 6 years of tenure track process, you really need to produce on the research side. So again, everything is focused on research, but not on teaching. And yet teaching is still, for most people, is 60% of their job. Okay, I think, so I'm just going to conclude, and then I'm going to open up to Q&A. Hopefully this has been useful. The initial results or observations are really suggesting that there is a major deficit in PhD training in the US in terms of how we are training people to be teachers and educators. Because of this deficit, students are clearly taking the initiative themselves. Those that are focused on becoming better educators find ways to fill a gap. And this is what the tips that we were bringing forward in this session have been all about. It's like, here's the tactics, here's the tips, here's the things that students are taking initiative to do. You know, if you want to become a better educator, you don't have to wait for the programs to change. You can do these things now. And then, you know, training of university educators clearly seems to be extremely weak in general, in the US context at least. And this is something that we have to address. You know, we can't be, you know, weak educators. It's, you know, 60% of what we do is teaching and learning, and developing students. And so our educational competencies are really important in that situation. Now, hopefully I'm doing okay time-wise. I may have gone longer than I planned, but I have happy to take any questions. And I think let me make sure I've got the chat open.
Yes, in fact, very informative, sir. As we were hearing, and you know, as I was also discussing with you, I think while the questions keep coming in, most of the people perhaps would be, you know, finding similarities of our education and doctoral studies system with the US. And I am curious, so maybe if we could start with my question. I was curious to know, why do you think that the British system of doctoral studies and the way the tenure track process runs, why is it so different, and why is it that US has not been able to adapt that kind of a system?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to stop sharing my screen here. Is it stop sharing? I
can see you. Yeah, I guess so.
Let me just
be able to see.
Okay, well, I've just got anyway, it should be okay. So yeah, I've just got everybody on the side of my screen, so hopefully everything's okay. I'm not sharing anymore, am I? Stop share. Hang on, I've got it now. There we go. Okay, I've got it. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Well, you know, I think systems develop in different ways, educational systems, and this is one of the reasons why we kept this to the US context. You know, we did have some Canadian students and actually some European students attend the doctoral consortium, and we decided to exclude them from the research because each system seems to be different. So, you know, for example, I think the difference really was that the UK system came out of this kind of old style, like this is your major contribution. So the PhD was, if you think about the old style of a PhD, it was a book. It was something that was going to be substantial contribution. And in many cases, you might do it later in your career. You know, you wouldn't necessarily do the PhD straight away at the beginning of your career. Whereas in the US, the PhD has always been kind of, this is your training to become, you know, a professor. And so, you know, really you do it at the beginning of your career, and it's in some ways very different. So as a consequence, I think of that basic philosophy, philosophical difference over the way in which the programs were designed originally has changed. I will say the British system's come in closer to the American system because, you know, everybody's got the research evaluation framework over there. And so publishing papers has become very important. And so this idea of breaking the thesis into 3, you know, publishable papers, you know, you still produce a thesis, but you just get 3 publications out of it. A lot of the British universities are kind of going in that direction too. They don't do the talk bit, you know, there was a big philosophical split, I think, between this idea that you should do, you know, talk classes and a comprehensive exam. That's very different. You know, in our view, you know, by the time you've done your masters, you've done all your talk classes. You should know everything that you need to know, and you know, you should then move on to doing research. So that's the kind of thing I don't particularly like that about the American system. That, you know, they spend, you know, at least a year of their 3 years doing talk classes and comprehensive examinations. I'm not super keen on that myself, because I think you know, 3 years is not a lot of time to do a dissertation, to do a good piece of research anyway. So, you know, so there's a big difference there.
Okay, there is a question from one of our scholars, Manu GC, who's put it in the chat box, saying that what is the average time or duration taken by a student to complete PhD in Ohio University, USA?
Yes, so the typical time for a PhD is 4 years. So you're doing like a year to a year and a half of, you know, taught classes with comprehensive examination, and then a slightly truncated time of like about 2.5 years typically to do the thesis. So it's less than, it's like, whereas in the UK it's supposed to be about 3 years. I would say, you know, but you know, with PhDs, depending on, you know, many of these students are full-time though, you've got to keep that in mind. And then, you know, it's not unusual for them to take 5 years though. So anything from 3 to 5 years.
Okay. And there's a question from Kaveri. I think she's saying that thanks for the opportunities. What the needs to explore about how, I think it's like, how about an university which would encourage its PhD scholars to provide teaching assignments? So is teaching assignments something that is provided to scholars who are also doing the PhD on a full-time and a part-time basis?
Yeah, I think in most cases, the answer would be yes. They will probably be doing less teaching if they were doing it on a part-time basis. And you know, the programs differ quite substantially on that particular item. So some programs, you know, it's a requirement. You have to teach at least once a year as a requirement of the program. Other programs are saying, like, no, we don't want you to teach at all. In fact, the university is saying we don't want PhD students teaching at all. And then other programs, it's an opportunity that you can exploit. But if you've got a research focused advisor, they're telling you don't do any teaching. And if you've got a different type of advisor, they might be saying, yeah, take the opportunities to teach that you can. And in some cases, the PhD students are getting paid as well. So that's how they're also subsidizing themselves a little bit while they're PhD students, is they get paid extra to do the teaching. So some of them are doing a lot of teaching because they need the money. And then of course, you know, there's danger there as well that, you know, you don't progress in your research side of your PhD enough because you're doing too much teaching. So yeah, it's definitely, it differs between programs, I would say.
Okay, one of the question I think which is coming from 2 or 3 participants together is from a learning perspective, which one is better, doing a part-time PhD, preferably maybe in most cases where the scholar is already pursuing you know, his or her own career in teaching, and doing the doctoral studies in a university. Is that a better option, or doing your PhD on a full-time basis, focusing on your doctoral studies, and then getting to teaching?
Yeah, there's no easy answer to that question. I think it really depends on the individual and what other commitments you've got. You know, if you've got family or, you know, financial commitments, there may be other reasons, and at what point you're choosing to do the PhD. I mean, I have had part-time PhD students in the British system, and it's hard doing a part-time PhD. It takes a long time to get done, and it takes a lot of discipline. So I do know that it's hard if you're a part-time PhD student. From a learning perspective, if you're actually in like a university and you're teaching and doing a PhD, I think that's the best combination. So, you know, for certain, you're going to get a lot of experience. You're going to be, you know, you're getting experience teaching while you're simultaneously doing the PhD, and you're in an environment that's going to be supportive of doing a PhD. Whereas, say, if you're, you know, I don't know, working and you're not in an academic environment and trying to do a PhD, I think that's quite hard. Yeah, I would also say that, you know, some of the people that kind of were taking the most initiative in the interviews that we've had some prior teaching experience. So not all the students we're interviewing are just purely sort of raw. Some are coming back from industry. Some are, you know, international PhD students that have no experience. Some are US PhD students that have no experience. And then there are, you know, people in there that we would describe as non-traditional, that have had a lot of experience teaching and then have decided to do a PhD to enhance their career, or, you know, did a bit of teaching out of earlier on, and then decided because you do have the option to teach as like an instructor, like a clinical professor or an instructor of practice in the US. So there are opportunities here to teach with a master's, and some of those people then decide they want to go on to a PhD. So it does differ by individual, I would say. There's no really good answer to that one way or the other. It really is dependent on what you know need to be doing. I mean, sometimes it's good to get it done and out of the way. So I do see merit in the full-time approach, but that doesn't work for everybody.
Okay. Although there is one more question, and I think I would also like our Dean Research, Dr. Banga sir, also to pitch in now. There's a question in the meantime from one of our scholars again, a very accomplished professional in his own field, Mr. Rukmangada, who is saying that the teaching concept, teaching assistant concept, is not prevailing in the Indian context. While that is true, I'll also give you a perspective. In many of our top institutions across the country, we have a teaching assistant concept, but then that's like a luxury. That's not something that's prevailing across the institutions in our country. However, also to give this perspective to you, sir, Dr. Luke, sir, as well as to Mr. Rukmangada, our university is encouraging faculty members, professors, to take up teaching assistants from their scholar base, doctoral student base. I think that's something that is really commendable that our university is doing. But given the fact that a lot of our scholars are also part-timers, which also means that while they are pursuing their other career options in teaching, some are assistant professors, associate professors also, so they are pursuing their PhD programs alongside their teaching. So therefore, the teaching assistant concept for them is not applicable. But for others, yes, that opportunity is open. Our university has provided that opportunity. So it's for the supervisors, the faculty members concerned, and the scholars to take it up suitably. May not always, it may not always lead to remunerative outcomes, because again, the scholars might have other full-time assignments and all that, but it is happening. But it is not happening in a big scale across the country, that much I can say. I mean, we are one of the universities who have kind of pioneered it for all our scholars, but it's happening in a smaller way, but it is starting off.
Yeah,
so,
and I would say as well, I mean, that the teaching assistant thing in the US is mixed as well. So I mean, most of the programs have some sort of teaching assistance component, but you know, in some cases they're just running around printing, you know, syllabus and you know, helping with grading of exams, and not really doing anything of substance that's going to help them. Some cases they were doing things of substance that help them, and it's not. I can't remember a teaching assistant kind of thing approach being a thing in the UK either. We didn't really have that in the United Kingdom, as far as I can remember. So it is fairly unique to the US. Yeah, and I would say also for those you know, people that are, you know, teaching and doing PhDs at the same time, you know, I come back to the reflective bit of this as well. It's like, you know, if some of these tips that the students are doing to help enhance themselves, we could all take, you know, as active professors too. So for example, you know, very few of us do peer observation or have, you know, a deliberate effort to observe our other colleagues, or, you know, or perhaps, for example, you know, do a proper reflection on our own performances. And so, or even, you know, like this idea of recording ourselves and viewing the recording. I mean, I'd hate to do it personally, but, you know, we don't, there are many practices there that are kind of best practices for teacher development in general, not just PhD teacher development. So I would recommend that for those people that are doing part-time PhDs and teaching, that they think about, you know, the experience is one thing, but you have to turn the experience into learning, and then the learning into better teaching. And so there's still some things there that we can do.
sorry, I think I could ask.
I can't hear anybody at the moment. I think somebody muted everybody.
Yeah, I'm requesting Dr. Banga sir, our Dean Research, to, yeah.
So we had an excellent session by Professor Luke, and I think now it has come at the right time. Research to become now educators. I think that is one of the very important sessions that we, you know, had. And Professor Luke, in fact, most of the research scholars we have today as participants are working somewhere as faculty members. That's the thing, as Dr. Anupama said. And getting their PhD will naturally help them become better teachers, as you rightly said. And furthermore, you you know, explained to us as to what is the program on PhD in the UK as well as US. I think we have good mix of these two, UK as well as US systems. And we also have examiners panels. There are two examiners panels, one from Indian universities and organizations, and one from outside. In fact, for me, my foreign examiners, one of the foreign examiners was from University of Manchester, UK. So we have that system over here in India, and even in university we have similar system being adopted, where we have got a panel of examiners from the Indian universities and institutes as well as from outside India. Okay, and furthermore, we do have courses like in US, but not too many. I think that's where we differ. These US PhD programs. We have minimal courses as a PhD whereas in US we have got larger number of courses. I think the extent of 40 credits. That's what we heard from one of our colleagues earlier. Now you have given all necessary tips to our researchers. I hope that all these tips, all this advice that given by you will go a long way. For our research scholars in their journey to complete their PhD. After PhD is only beginning of the major journey and in their career, and I'm sure they'll our research scholars will make the best use of whatever you have said. And with this, let me thank you profusely on behalf of the university. Right at 7:30 in the morning, you started your session. That's great. Whereas here it is, now around 6:15, and it is in the evening, and I think all our participants had a nice session in the evening, whereas you had spent your more than 1 hour with us right in the morning. I thank you profusely again, and we will be in touch with you further. Probably we'll have some sessions, and with this I thank you again. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I very much enjoyed it, and I hope to, after we get to travel again, maybe I'll get to meet you all in person at some point.
Oh, sure. Yeah, right.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Sir, for accepting our invitation, and very valuable inputs and your research in progress. Perhaps some collaboration we will have also with India, and maybe something to do with the Indian perspective or the Asian perspective going forward. We will join hands and take it forward, sir. And once I think this pandemic is over, by the grace of God, we also look forward to hosting you at the university in Bangalore, India.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I would like to thank Dr. M.K. Banga, Dean Research Cell, Dayanand Sagar University, for giving the opportunity for inviting eminent distinguished guests for the university's doctoral scholars, and also his philosophy. Dr. Banga's philosophy is also that knowledge sharing must be not only restricted to the scholars or the students of the university, it must percolate to all in the academia as well as the industry. So university's purpose is to have the knowledge disseminated across the entire ecosystem, for which he is always encouraging me to ensure that the programs reach out to maximum number of people, so that maximum number of stakeholders in the community can benefit. So I really thank him for the opportunity that he is giving us, and we would like to continue this session. And we have an upcoming session on 14th of August by one of the majors of the Indian Army, who will be coming forward to give some motivational sessions as well as leadership qualities, especially in these tough times of COVID-19. So we will have the session on 14th of August, Friday in the evening. Details of the session will be sent to one and all. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for participating. Thank you, Luke sir, for your active participation, and thank you very much for the entire initiative that you had for this session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Dr. Banga sir, shall we log out?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Imtiaz, thanks so much.